I'm so pleased to have Tom and Don here. I love food, and I'm actually a Southern boy myself, from Southern Italy. I have an affinity for Southern cuisine. So I'm going to see how much red sauce we have tonight, Tom. But I actually do like Southern food. Coming from upstate New York, when I moved down here, I was really fascinated about learning about regional cuisine in this part of the country. And so I am a fan of Southern food. I'm really looking forward to learning about Eugene Walter. Thomas Head is a Washington-based food writer, and he served as the food and wine editor of the Washingtonian for a number of years. And Don, where's Don? Don's there. Oh, we actually didn't get to meet. And you are also a food writer as well, and you run the Eugene Walter estate or trust at the moment. So we have the real inside information about what sounds to be a fascinating culinary hero. So I'm going to turn it over to our author. Don's going to speak first? Okay, thank you so much.
I should tell you that I had never heard of Eugene Walter in my adult life until a friend said, if you're planning on moving to Alabama, which my wife and I were, we were living in Los Angeles at the time, you need to meet Eugene Walter. He was active in Cinecittà when he lived in Rome. And I thought, how did I miss this man? Well, arrangements were made, and when my wife and I moved to Mobile, Alabama, I went to dinner with Eugene Walter, and he invited me to come back to his house and enjoy a digestif. So when I entered the house, I couldn't help but notice that to my right was an aldehyde sofa, which was in shreds. And 5 cats presented themselves, and Eugene said, you'll have to excuse the cats, they're learning to upholster. Then he said, why don't you join me in the cat-free room? We'll have a nice drink and we can chat. Well, as a Southerner, if any of you are Southerners, you know that when we get together, we have to find out who we know and who we're related to. So we spent the first 30 minutes talking about our acquaintances and our relatives and where so-and-so was from and what they did and that sort of thing. But as the night progressed, Eugene started telling me stories of people that he knew in his life. And I listened and I thought, well, that's fascinating. But here's this man in Mobile living in a very modest house, although the walls were covered in paintings and the shelves were covered with curios and sculptures. But still I thought, is this guy pulling my leg? Is it possible that this little man living here in Mobile actually knew all of these people? Well, I found out that actually he did know all of those people. I did some research on my own on the internet and found out that Eugene Walter was active in Rome in the 1960s at the height of Italian filmmaking. He was an assistant to Federico Fellini. The two met because Eugene was a puppeteer. And a friend of his was visiting from the United States, and they put on a puppet play on the streets of Rome. And who should attend but Federico Fellini, who was a big fan of puppets. So he got to know Eugene, and he said, why don't you come work for me? I need a translator. So Eugene started translating scripts from Italian into English because all Italian directors were looking for someone to back their projects. And if a script was in English, it was much easier to do the presentation and find someone who might want to invest in the project. Eugene, being the hound that he was, though, anytime someone was in Rome making a movie, Eugene would say, do you have a part maybe that I could be in? Well, he was in Blake Edwards' the original Pink Panther. He was in Lena Wertmüller's The Ballad of Belle Starr. He was in Federico Fellini's 8½, where he played the American journalist. He was in Fellini's Juliet of the Spirits, where he played the Mother Superior. Now, the interesting thing about the Mother Superior was you never saw her face. She was in a habit and was completely covered. And there was a lot of discussion in his hometown of Mobile whether that was actually Eugene Walter or not under that habit. Well, when I went to Eugene's house and he wanted me to come in the house, he would make this gesture with his hand, which meant, come on in. Well, the Mother Superior in Juliet of the Spirits, when she was motioning for the young nuns to come, Gave that sign, so there's Eugene. No longer any argument. He was in what he said was hundreds of movies, and he probably was. He was with Ray Milland in the Pink Pajama Game, I think it was. He was in Sinbad the Sailor. They filmed in Egypt for that one. So anyone that was in town making a movie, Eugene would try to get a part. At the same time, he was also translating scripts for a number of different Italian directors. He was even more famous for the dinner parties that he gave at his palazzo in Rome. Now, the way he came by this palazzo was, after he returned from World War II to his native city of Mobile, Alabama, people said, Eugene, you need to seek your fame and fortune outside of Mobile. Why don't you go to New York and give it a try? Eugene went to New York, got an apartment in Greenwich Village, and who should live across the hall from him but Anais Nin? Who should live in the basement apartment but Andy Warhol, who was known at that time as Baby Andrew. Eugene worked with Anais Nin on a film with her husband, which I've been unable to find a copy of. It's called The Obscure Telescope. But it's one of the few film endeavors that Anais Nin was engaged in. But she and Eugene worked together on that. Eugene was very interested in literary journals, and he got in touch with an American who was living in Rome at the time, Marguerite Catani, who was from Pennsylvania. But she had married Prince Catani, and she became the Princess Catani. And they had vast landholdings throughout Rome. Eugene got in touch with her and said, I understand that you're starting a new journal called the Bottega Oscura, which loosely translated means Shop of Dark Streets. And so she said, yes, I am. Would you like to come work for me? He said, yeah, I'd love to. So she said, well, why don't you meet me in Paris and we'll see what we can get going. Well, he moved to Paris. Who should he run into but the Paris Review crowd? Eugene worked for the Paris Review to get it up and going. He wrote one of the first stories that appeared in the Paris Review, and he continued to be an editor for the journal throughout his life. After Catani met him, she would go from Rome to Paris, and they would work on the journal together. Well, she got tired of that and said, Eugene, why don't you just move to Rome? I'm tired of coming to Paris. If you were here in Rome, we could just see each other every day. So Eugene did. He picked up and he moved to Rome. Unknown to Catani, the only place he could find to live was a hut on the side of a hill. Well, when Catani found out that Eugene was living in a hut, she said, oh, Eugene, this won't do. I've got a place where you can stay. And so she gave him the top floor of one of her palazzos in Rome. Well, being a southern boy, Eugene said, I've got to have a garden. So outside on his terrace, he planted a vegetable garden and also an herb garden. And he started having these lovely dinner parties, and anybody that was in Rome would go by Eugene's to have dinner. Well, his fame began to spread, and it was said on both sides of the Atlantic that if you go to Rome, you need two audiences, one with the Pope and one with Eugene Walker.